Hi, what you're looking at is a NuTone Model 2081, which is the A-channel indoor remote station from a NuTone Model 2071 Stereo Music Intercom System. The 2081 is the A-channel, which has the A and B channel volume controls and the intercom control switch on it, because on a Model 2071 the intercom works through the A channel. In a real installation, you would have a matching station, which would be a 2082, and that would be mounted across the room as the B channel speaker. It wouldn't have any controls like this. It would just have a blanking panel here, and that's what makes up a stereo pair. The Model 2071 was the top of the line stereo music intercom in 1964, and it was a spare no expense design. There were no monaural stations and there were no small 5-inch stations. There were only large 8-inch indoor stereo pair stations. Like all indoor remote stations, eventually they need some general service. And what I'm going to show you in this video is how to clean the controls on a NuTone Model 2081. So let's flip it over and take a look at the back, and then we'll get to the servicing. So what you have here on the back is a NuTone 8-inch 3.2 ohm speaker cone, and down here we have the back of the control assembly, and this is the part that we're going to be concerned with today. To make this a little easier, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pop out the control insert from the rest of the station, because that makes it easier for me to work on. And it's actually pretty easy to do because everything's just screwed together. We have two wires that come off the back of the speaker terminal, and they go down here, and all I'm going to do is loosen the screws here, and these will come off. It's easy to remember where they go because here it says speaker A, and the black wire goes with the other black wire, and the red wire goes with the red wire. So that's pretty easy. So now we've disconnected the speaker, and we're going to unscrew these two hex head screws. These are 1/4-inch screws. And like I always say, don't lose the screws because you're going to need them when you put it back together. So what are we going to do? We're going to take the screws and we're going to put it in a little cup, because that way we don't lose it. And once you've done that, you can take the control insert out, and we can put the rest of this aside so it's not in the way. Before we get started, let's take a look at the controls from the control insert. So we have a fairly simple intercom switch here. It's simply a push to talk, and that's all it does. It's just a single switch. And over here we have dual volume controls. Here we have the A channel volume control, which is the inner knob, and the outer knob is the B channel volume control. They're not tied together. They can each be turned independent of each other. And you can see on the B channel the little notch right here on the gold trim to help indicate where it's set. And of course, ideally, if your speaker separation is fairly balanced, when you turn these, they would both be approximately set to the same position. So it's two separate volume controls. To get started, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take the knobs off and put them aside because we don't really need them there. And then we'll go ahead and turn it around and take a look at the back. The back is actually fairly simple. This portion here is the switch assembly for the intercom push button here. This is the same type of switch control design that's used in many early NuTone intercom systems. The intercom is a 3-wire circuit, and it's the same type of 3-wire design. And basically what you have here is you have this springy metal rod right here, and when you push the button, it pushes the rod. So when the rod is in the at-rest position, when you're not pushing the button, it makes a connection with this contact right here, and then when you push it and it moves up, it makes a connection with this contact here. So it's a very rudimentary design, and I'm going to show you two different ways to clean it. Here we have our volume control assemblies, and you can see it's actually two individual volume controls, one here and one here. So one is the A channel and the other one is the B channel. So when we clean these, we have to clean both of them because you want both channels to be clear and static free. To do the cleaning, you're going to need a few things. And like I said, I'm going to show you two different ways to do the cleaning. One is sort of the simple, really quick way to do it, and the other is a little more intensive. So what are you going to need? Well, you're going to need your deoxit D5, which is what we recommend in all of our videos for cleaning the volume controls and the switches in intercom remote stations. This is what we use. You can order this online from Amazon. This is deoxit D5. Please don't go out to the garage and find some can with the label that it's fallen off that's been out there since the early 70s and you're not sure exactly what it is, and try to use that to clean your controls. Odds are it'll turn out to be either WD-40, which you should never ever use in volume controls, or some kind of carburetor cleaner, and then you'll melt all the plastic and ruin your station. So get the right stuff. You can order this on Amazon. It's not very expensive. This is for the rudimentary cleaning. For the more extensive cleaning, we're going to need a couple other things. We're going to need some alcohol or some type of other general purpose cleaner. I like spray alcohol. If you have alcohol in a bottle, you can use that too with a little brush. This is what I use because it's more convenient, and there are some advantages to the spray. So we'll have that. We're also going to need, of course, a selection of rags, because this is messy and you don't want to get spray all over your workbench and everything. And we're going to use a little bit of Simichrome polish, and we're going to use a little bristle brush. It's like a little miniature bottle brush. And I was told recently by a viewer that you can go down to your local drugstore in the cosmetic department and buy these. These are what women use for like eyelash brushes or something like that. They put mascara on with it or something, but you can buy it at Walgreens or someplace like that. I'm going to actually use a pair of gloves because I don't feel like getting chemicals and stuff all over my hands this morning. So we'll go ahead and put these on, and then we'll get to it. It's better if you put it on the right way. All right. So let's go ahead and get set up and we'll get started. So we're going to do the volume controls first, because the volume controls, there's only really one way to clean them, and that will be simpler before we get into the intercom switch. If you look at the bodies of the volume controls, they're both round, they're about the size of a quarter. And you'll notice that over here on this side of the back one and this and the same spot on the front one, there is a portion that sticks out, and there are three little tabs, and that's where the wires are soldered on. This is the area that we're going to look at to get the cleaner inside the volume control. So what's inside the volume control and why does it need to be cleaned? Well, that's actually a really good question. Think of the inside of the volume control like a donut, and it's round because the volume control is round. Wrapped around the outside of the donut is a really fine piece of wire. It's about the same size as a hair on your head, and it's wound around and around and around, and it goes all the way around the donut, around and around and around. The knob is connected to a contact in there, and the contact sits and presses against one spot of the wire. And when you turn the volume control, it turns the contact left or right, making the volume louder or softer. What happens is the little wire over time gets oxidized. It gets a coating on it, just like brass gets a coating on it when it's been out for a long time. The oxidation, the coating, interferes with the connection of the contact, and especially because in most houses the contact may have been set like this in this spot, and it might have been sat like that for 25 years. And then one day somebody comes along and they turn it and they move it from where it's been sitting to over here where it's really oxidized, and all of a sudden all the sound goes away because you've moved it from what's a relatively clean spot in comparison to the exposed area, which is heavily oxidized. Now sometimes you can get by with just rotating the volume control back and forth is full travel, and just the physical rubbing of the contact on the wire will wear away some of the oxidation, and it might be better. But usually if you have a system that, let's say, was from 1964, which would be 55 years ago, it's not going to be good enough and you need some help. And that's where the deoxit D5 comes in. This is especially made to help remove the oxidation. It improves the connection between the contact point and the wire, and it leaves a coating on the wire so it doesn't tend to oxidize again so quickly. So what we need to do is we have to get the cleaner inside the volume control where the wire is located. Just spraying it on the outside isn't going to be good enough. We have to get it inside. Now, the other thing I'm going to point out, and I have people that think it's a good idea and I can tell you it's not, these type of volume controls, these were not designed to be taken apart. If you think you can disassemble it and get to the insides and give it a real thorough cleaning, you be wrong, because it wasn't designed to be disassembled, which means if you get it apart, that's one thing, but then you have to get it back together. And it has these little metal tabs that are bent over that hold it all together. And if you break the tab off, then it won't be squeezed together properly and it won't work properly, and it's not worth the risk. This type of dual volume control assembly, these are almost impossible to find nowadays. So don't take the chance, because if you break it, then you'll be sad. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at this area right here where the wires come out and the contacts. The inner part of the volume control assembly is this little brown fiberglass circuit board, basically. If you look carefully between the little brown board and the gray part right here, there's little gaps and little notches and things. See how it moves? When I put the screwdriver in there, it flexes a little bit. That's where we're going to spray the cleaner. It's not a huge gap, it's a really, really small gap. And what we're going to do is we're going to take our deoxit, D5, and we have our little spray straw on it, and we're going to spray some into the gap. And on these types of early volume controls, because they were good quality volume controls, the gaps are really, really small. Because the other thing that happens to volume controls, because all of this is exposed to the inside of the wall in your house, over time, after 50 plus years, there's a certain amount of dirt and dust that filters its way down into and finds its way into the volume controls. And that dirt and dust settles on the little tiny hair-sized wire, and it holds moisture from the humidity in the air, and that makes the wire oxidize even more. And the gaps are very small because they're good quality controls, but eventually this needs to be done. Now, sometimes when I've gone to people's houses, the controls are so stiff and so hard to turn that you barely can do it by grabbing the knob, and you're tempted to grab a pair of pliers and wrench on the knob to try to get it to turn, and that's bad. So once you spray it in, what you want to do is you want to rotate both the inner and outer shafts of the control to work the contact point around and around. It helps spread out the cleaner that you sprayed in, and it begins to improve in how it feels. Once you've done it once, odds are you need to do it again. Because, like I said, the gaps are really small, and it's hard to get a lot of cleaner inside the volume control. So you just keep working it back and forth and back and forth. Now, we're doing this with the control out of the complete remote station because it's easier for me to show you. You can do this while it's still all connected. You can take the speaker off the wall and you can sort of balance it against the wall and use a rag to not get spray on the wallpaper or on the carpet, and you can spray it and work it back and forth, and you can actually do this while the system is on and playing. There's nothing wrong with doing that. You're not going to hurt anything by doing that, and it's actually a really good way to do it because it allows you to hear how the sound improves, and you lose the scratchiness and the staticky noise that you get when you turn the knobs, and that tells you that the cleaning is being effective. So that's pretty much how you clean the volume control. There isn't a lot more to do other than keep at it until it really, really works well. Because once you clean them once, odds are you won't need to clean them again for another 10 or 15 years. So it's worth spending an extra couple of minutes. As I was taught, the difference between a good job and a great job is an extra 5 minutes. So spend the extra 5 minutes. You don't have that many of these in your house, and do a really good job. Now we're going to move on and talk about the intercom switch. As I explained, the intercom switch is very simple and very primitive. You push the button, it moves the springy metal rod back and forth. You can see that in the middle, and it touches either one contact or the other. This is the Flintstone switch. This is rocks and sticks. The springy metal rod is the stick, and the two contacts are the rocks. Because, you know, Fred and Wilma there, they were really inventive. You know, they could make a record player out of stone and a bird as a needle. So that's pretty good. But this is about similar to that type of technology. This is definitely not the Jetsons type technology. There are two ways to do this. And I'm going to point this out before we start. The springy metal rod is here. And here's one contact up here. And here's the second contact down here. And you'll notice the springy metal rod is kind of a silvery kind of color, and the contacts here are all black. Now, the simple way to do this, the quick and dirty, easy way to do it is you take your deoxit D5 and you spray a little on the rod and you spray a little on the contacts and you push it back and forth some. And maybe if you want to get really crazy with it, you take another rag and you daub off the extra that you got all over everything. And that's it. That's all you're going to do. And that will get by for a lot of people. That's good enough. But I'm also going to show you a better way to do this, because you're going to be surprised what we find when we take this apart, and you're going to be surprised what it's going to be like when we get all done. All right, this is your warning. This requires disassembly, and the disassembly leaves you with small pieces. So you need something to put the small pieces in, a cup or something like that, because if you don't, you know where they're going to end up? They're going to end up on the floor. And if you still have shag carpet from 1964, you may never find them again. So you need some type of container to put things in. I tell people this all the time. They hear it in the videos. Do they follow it? No. Do they lose pieces? Yes. Do they call me looking for the pieces that they lost? All the time. Do I have them? Not always. So let's not lose pieces. Let's put them in a cup. It's really simple. So what we're going to do is we're going to take out this screw and this screw, and put them in the cup, and then we're going to remove the two contacts so we can get to the springy metal rod. And all you have to do is unscrew them. The screws are fine. We don't need to clean the screws. The wires actually attach under the screws, so that will be fine. So we'll take those. So yeah, put the screws in the cup. And now we need a little pair of needle nose pliers, because I've got big fingers. And we're going to lift the contacts out of the back of the control. So there's the lower one, and there's the upper one. And now what we have left is the springy metal rod, and it's attached to the button on the front. Now, we're not going to take the springy metal rod out, because the springy metal rod is held in place underneath the volume control assembly, and the volume control assembly is held on with a nut here on the front. And one of the things that tends to happen to speakers from this era are, because of the stress of the springy metal rod, the plastic here in the recess portion around the volume control tends to get weak, and sometimes it will break. And if it breaks loose, then not only is the volume control not tight and it's going to wiggle around, which isn't the worst thing in the world, but there isn't anything holding this end of the springy metal rod, so it won't be springy anymore. And it's not worth the risk, and it's not really necessary, because we can clean the springy metal rod in place. It'll be fine. What you're looking at are the two contacts that I took out of the back of the control. This is the lower contact and this is the upper contact. And if you look really carefully, you'll notice that they're both exactly the same shape, because they are. One of them faces this way and the other one faces the same way, but because of their shape, they work as a switch for the springy metal rod. This was very clever on NuTone's part, because you only had to make one of these and it would work for all of the applications that you needed to have. But you do need to keep them oriented the right way, because it's easy if you drop them on the floor or you get them turned around the wrong way, you won't be able to figure out how to put them back, and then the switch won't work right. As a tip, if you're unsure, you can always go to another station in your house that you haven't taken apart yet, because you should only do these one at a time. time and look how they're oriented in the other station, and that'll remind you, and then it'll be easy. So what we're going to do is we're going to clean the springy metal rod first, and then we're going to do the contacts. So we're looking at our springy metal rod, which is right here, and we're going to clean it because it gets oxidized also. So the first thing I like to do is I spray a little alcohol on it, just to wet it up a little bit, because alcohol is actually a really good cleaner. And now we're going to use our Simichrome polish, and we're going to use our little mascara or bristle brush, bottle brush, and we just put a little bit of the Simichrome on the brush like that, and we're going to get our magnifiers so I can actually see it properly. And all we're going to do is like this. And we're going to scrub away at the springy metal rod, and we only really care about the part that's down where the contacts are, because the rest of it isn't really doing anything other than just being springy. Also, because it's still in place, you only can really get to the top and left and right sides. You can't get underneath it very well. Probably does a little bit just because the brush sort of fits around it some. But it doesn't really matter because the part we care about the most is the top and the two sides. So you just sort of scrub away at it a little bit with the polish, and when you think it's probably close enough, take your alcohol spray again and wash it off. And this is why I like the alcohol spray, because it's like putting a nozzle on your garden hose. It sort of washes everything away. Now, it probably will be really hard for you to see, but the end where I cleaned is now clean and shiny, and the rest of it, which isn't horrible, still has some oxidation on it. Hard to see in the video, but it really does. And we'll sort of dab that off. The other thing that's nice about the alcohol is it just dries in the air on its own. By the time we're done with the contacts, this will be all dry and ready to go. So we'll put that aside, and now we're going to do the contacts. So here's one of our contacts, and as I pointed out earlier, it's kind of black. And so what are we going to do with this? We're going to do with this the same thing we did with the springy metal rod. We're going to clean it, and I'm going to try to do this in a way that you can actually see it. So there's the metal rod, and again, a little alcohol, a little Simichrome polish on our little brush, and we're going to simply scrub away at the contact. Now the contacts are usually much worse than the springy metal rod. So it'll probably take a little bit longer. And if you notice that you start running out of polish, put a little more. Because, you know, if you're going to spend the time and make the effort to do this, you don't want it to not turn out well. The polish is doing most of the work. You're just scrubbing it with a brush. Alright, so that's good for a start. I think you can see we have polish residue all over it. So now we're going to rinse it off. And guess what? It's not black anymore. Now it's shiny silver. So there's the clean one, and there's the original black one. This is what it looked like when it was brand new. This is what it looks like after 50 years. And you can sort of get an idea of what the oxidation does to the metal surface, and also how that would prevent it from working really well. Now, it's important to do all of the surfaces that the springy metal rod actually touch. But it's also equally important to do where the hole is for the little screw, because that's where the wire connects, and you want a good connection there. And also this slanty end down here needs to be done, because on one half of the switch that's a contact, and on the other half of the switch it's this one. And I also sort of do the inside just a little bit, because if you're going to do it, let's do it right. So I'm going to go ahead and finish this one and let you watch, because there's nothing more exciting than watching some guy on YouTube scrub a contact from a switch. So we'll do this. And what's interesting about this is a really tried and true way to clean metal surfaces in switches or contacts that you can actually get apart. And I do this when we also, along with all the intercoms that we repair, we do a lot of vintage NuTone door chimes. And the vintage NuTone chimes that were made in the late 30s through the early 40s, and then again from the late 40s through the late 50s, which is a pretty good amount of time, they all have their certain types of switches and circuit assemblies and things like that, and they were of what seems to be good quality. But after, if you have a door chime that was made in 1940 and now it's 2019, it's going to be heavily oxidized, and it makes a real difference in how the whole thing works. So now I've done all the surfaces, including the inside. Now we're going to rinse it off. And now it's all clean and shiny again. So I'm going to go ahead and turn the camera off. I'm going to clean the second one because you don't really need to sit through both of them, and then we'll go ahead and put it all back together. Okay, I'm back. So the cleaning is done. Both contacts are now shiny and as close to new as they're ever going to be. They're not black anymore. Now what we have to do is we have to put them back. And you remember where they go, don't you? And which way around? Well, I do, because I've done this lots of times. Like I said, if you don't remember, you can always go look at another one, or you could watch this video again and see how I do it. So they're both the same shape, so it doesn't matter which one you put where. What I like to do is I like to put the top one first, because the top one, the long end goes inside where the springy metal rod is, and it actually fits under the springy metal rod, because when the button is not pressed, the rod is touching the contact. So it goes in that way. You can see that, right? It goes in this way with the long end down in there underneath the rod. And once you put that in place, then you put the screw back in and you carefully snug it down. Now, we talked about the brittle plastic thing. That holds true also for where the screws go in. So you don't need to wrench on these, you just need to snug them up. Right now we have no wire under it, but when you reinstall this and you wrap the wire back under the head of the screw, just snug it down. You don't have to go, "Rrr." You're not building a bridge, you're just putting a little speaker screw in. So, be easy on it. Now the other one goes the other way, which the short curvy end here goes inside down here, like this. And it just plops right in. Just like that. See if I can rotate it around slowly so maybe you can see the whole thing. Like that. See, the short curvy end goes down that way. Very simple. And once you get that one in place, then you put your screw back in on that one, because again, you don't want to move this around from where you're working on it with the screws out, because what will happen? The contact will fall out and it'll fall in the orange shag carpet, and then you'll never find it again. Now our springy metal rod has been cleaned. Our two contacts are no longer black, they're now shiny like they were when they were new, and our switch has been thoroughly cleaned. And we push the button and the springy metal rod moves back and forth and it touches the contacts, and it will work much, much, much better than it did before. And we also cleaned our volume controls, so now they turn really easily. And you're thinking, well, we're almost done, aren't we? Well, we are almost done, but on this particular one, because this is kind of a rare control, you can see it looks a little shabby. It's got a lot of finger marks and stuff on it, and while we're doing this, maybe we want to clean that up a little bit. So what are we going to do? Well, we use our alcohol. We just spray it just a little. We have an old toothbrush, and usually the toothbrush will do a pretty good job. Not always. One of the things about the surface of these controls is they have sort of a grain to them. They have like grain in wood, and that tends to catch dirt and stuff, and sometimes it gets really embedded, and that didn't really come out much better. Sometimes another way to do this is just use a blue Scotch-Brite pad, which I think I have one, so let me get it. So we have a blue Scotch-Brite pad, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut a little piece out of it just to make it smaller. And you always want to use the blue because the blue won't scratch things. At least that's what the Scotch-Brite people say, and they wouldn't lie. And what you can do is you can sort of scrub it lightly in the direction of the grain of the plastic, and it should slowly remove the marks and the grime. Now again, this is the hardcore thing to do. This is not something everybody's going to do, but if you're sprucing up your system and you want it to look the best that it possibly can, you can work at it. That's much better. I think it will take more work to do, but you could get the majority of it off relatively easily, and that's not too bad. So that's just an idea for those of you who want to make it even better. And now our control is almost done, but we need to put the knobs back on. So let me go get them. So here are our two knobs. We have the inner knob and the outer knob. And the whole time I've been showing you how to clean the remote control parts. These have been over at the sink soaking in some orange citrus cleaner to help loosen up the grime that gets in the ridges in the knobs. Because there's nothing that makes a unit look more shabby than having grunge in the ridges of the control knobs. So I'm going to show you how we clean these. I've showed this in other videos. And again, this is not hard to do, but it's something not everyone's going to do. So what you need is, you need a little brass bristle brush. Now normally when I do this, I do it under a stream of warm running water at the sink, but that's too hard to film. And so you'll have to imagine that there's water running down on this. And all you have to do is you take the bristle brush and you want to run it through the ridges in the same direction that the ridges travel in. You don't want to scrub across the ridges, you want to scrub with the ridges. And you're not even really scrubbing, you're more like wiping. I put it on it and pull it and put it on it and pull it, because what you want to do is have the brass bristles fit into the grooves, and it clears out the grunge. So what's the grunge from? Well, it's all the oils and dirt and things from your fingers. And after 50 years, there can be quite a lot of it. And it makes makes the knobs look dirty and brown and unsightly and not nice. It degrades the overall look of the unit. And grooved knobs were very popular, especially in the early days. And as you can see, this doesn't really take that long to do. That one's pretty good. Sometimes if it's really, really stubborn, after you've soaked it and then cleaned it, you can soak it again and then clean it again, and that usually will get the last little remaining parts out. So that's pretty good. And since it's a stereo one and we have two knobs, see, this knob is worse because it's the outer knob, and maybe it got turned more. But you just simply go around and you rotate it a little bit at a time. and it'll make a big difference. I did a service call for a customer recently. He had a NuTone 2561 that was installed when the house was built in 1973. And we did sort of a complete restoration on the master unit because it didn't work anymore. And then I went out and reinstalled it and did general service on all of his stations. And he was amazed at how the unit, he was very concerned about how the whole thing was going to look when it was done. And I assured him that it would be better than it was when I picked it up. And he was actually most impressed with the knobs because all the grunge after all those years was gone and they look like brand new. So that's pretty good. So there's two more things we can do with these to touch them up just a little bit. This one's not too bad. They each have the gold ring around them, the little accent trim ring. That one's not too bad. The outer one, it's got some nicks and some wear, and lots of times it'll be worn off altogether. So what you can do is, because if you're going to do a good job, remember, good job, great job, 5 extra minutes. You get one of these. This is a Krylon 18 karat gold leafing pen. You can buy them online. They last for a long time. You can get one of those, you shake it up, get the paint flowing a little bit, and then you can very carefully go around and touch up the edge. Gold trim was very popular on sets in the 60s and early 70s. This one's not too bad. And on models like the 2090 and the 2540, they actually have a fair amount of gold trim on them, on the highlighted raised edges. And most of the time it's all worn off. When you do the outer knob, make sure you leave the little black notch mark. That's your indexing mark so you know where it's set. But see, that only took like a minute to do both of them. You do have to let them dry, because otherwise you'll smear the paint onto the black and you don't want that. The last thing you can do after it's all dry, if you want to, is you can get some of that at the automotive parts store. You can get some of that spray stuff. It's kind of like Armor All, but it's for the outside of your car, and it's designed to make the black plastic pieces on your car that have faded out and now they're kind of gray colored, it makes them black again. You can take a little bit of that and put it on a rag, and you can rub it on the black parts of the knob, and that'll deepen up the black and make it look even better. So we'll be really careful here, and we're going to go ahead and put these back on. The outer knob fits just one way, and you want to make sure that when it's turned all the way up, oops, it's not on all the way. There we go, that's upside down. So I've got it upside down, so it's at maximum, but the index mark is at 11 o'clock, where it should be down here at 5 o'clock, so we'll pull it loose, we'll rotate it, and then put it back on. Now it's correct. This one only goes on one way because it has a flat spot, and like that. And there's our thoroughly cleaned and serviced remote control assembly for our NuTone 2081 inside remote station. All we have to do is pop this back into the grill and hook up the wires from the speakers again, and we're all done. So that's the easy way and the more extreme way to service the intercom switch and the volume controls on your NuTone 2081 inside remote station for your NuTone 2071 Stereo Music Intercom System. I hope you found this interesting and perhaps helpful. If you did, please give it a thumbs up on YouTube, because that always helps. There'll be a banner right here that shows you how to subscribe. Go to our YouTube homepage, click on the bell, and when you click on the bell, make sure you click on it so you receive all notifications, and then you put in your email address, and every time we post a new video, you'll get a notification and you can watch it. That's all for today. See you on the next video.